We are joined with one of my favorite people, Margaret Kimberly, easily
Hi.
a big friend of the show. Margaret Kimberly is a senior columnist and editor at Black Agenda Report and author of Presidential, Black America, and the Presidents. Oh, Margaret, welcome to the show. How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
I'm doing okay. I'm getting up a little earlier than usual, which is an
Well,
indication of how much I like you. But anyway,
Aw, I appreciate that. I'm sorry for waking you up early.
it's
I just kept the
okay.
same. Well, for the most, when the show ended, I just kept the same pattern.
I
I,
Sure, it's okay.
yeah.
I'm just teasing you a little bit, but
Well,
it's good to be
I,
back.
I greatly appreciate you joining me. And I've asked everybody who's come on to the show, especially everybody that deals with politics, the same question: how did Kamala Harris spend $1 billion in 3 months to lose to a man that they call racist, fascist, Hitler, he sexual abuser, an insurrectionist? They called him everything but a child of God. And yet he did not just win, he even won the popular vote. How did Harris spend $1 billion to lose this race? Give me your thoughts on this.
Well, I think there's a bigger issue for her. The Republicans are the party that had the Democratic nominating process. Donald Trump went through the primary. It was clear that Republican voters wanted him, regardless of what the Republican establishment wanted, or regardless of people who didn't like him wanted. Republicans wanted him. He had solid support from his people. She, on the other hand, was the top-down choice. A mess because Biden, it's funny to me. I think of these people as being cutthroats, the Democratic big, rich donors and so forth. But they really thought they could just sneak Biden in again. They
They
thought
did.
nobody noticed his declining health, his frailty. But anyway, so
Well,
they
now they're
keep
blaming
Biden.
him, though. Just to interrupt real quick, now they're blaming Biden. Like the same people who said Biden was sharp as a tack. Every time I see him, he's awesome. He
Yep.
runs, a mile in 4 minutes. All of those people are now like, well, Joe Biden should have gotten out the race early. He was clearly out of his mind. It's like,
Yes, I
okay,
know. What's that expression? Success has 1,000 fathers, failure is an orphan. So of course everybody's turning.
pretty
There's a
much.
lot of finger pointing now.
Pretty
But
much.
and the other issue is Kamala Harris herself. She is a person who I say has been promoted above her skill set. She's not a good politician. She doesn't connect with people. She can't even connect. These interviews I saw, friendly interviews, she was always nervous. The nervous laugh, the word salad, non sequiturs. I think it was Stephen Colbert who asked her, "Well, how are you different from Biden?" I would think she'd been briefed on that and had an answer, but she just says, "Well, I'm not Trump." Well, that doesn't tell anybody anything. And as far as this $1 billion, I think, and she's not the first Democrat to raise $1 billion. Hillary raised $1 billion. Biden raised $1 billion.
So did
Obama,
Obama. Yeah.
his second run, raised $1 billion. So they're the money party.
Mm-hmm.
Finance capital, Silicon Valley, they prefer the Democrats and they have lots of cash. But there's something else that no one is talking about that I think caused her to lose. And that was the end of the COVID support programs. What people had, there are millions of people who are struggling and they're never talked about. So the child tax credit was huge for them. People who got to stay on Medicaid, got to get SNAP, the little stimulus pay, not so little for some people. And then one day they were gone. Poof. And with no explanation that most people can understand. You can talk about, the Senate process or Mansion and Cinema or the parliamentary, whatever their excuse was never explained to the American people. She never made it a campaign issue. It seems to me you would say, I need a big Democratic majority so we can bring back the child tax credit. Something, anything. But I think it's now 7 or 8 million people who voted for Biden who did not vote for her, who did not vote.
Yeah. I pointed
Um,
it out on the show. I think Joe Biden had like 81 million votes.
right.
Harris had 71 million. It might be up to 73 now, but at that
Yeah, I
point,
think
but
it's
she
up
was
to
still double.
73.
Yeah,
But it's
that's
a
still
big
7
chunk of
million people.
people.
Yeah.
Trump he got 74 million votes the last time. Now he's up to 76. So Trump got 2 million more voters this time than last time.
Yep.
And she lost a big chunk of Biden people. And I think this decision to not address any issues that impact ordinary people, it killed her. And there's another group of people that they didn't think about, and that's the infrequent voter, the low motivation voter. There's some people who they're going to vote no matter what. You don't need to coax them. You don't need to convince them. And then there are people for whom it is not a priority. And when you have a child tax credit 1 month and don't have it the next, and you don't get an explanation, then you're one of those people. Mm-hmm. So I think it was her weaknesses as a candidate, the fact that her website, which had nothing on it for 50 days, you think nobody noticed? You couldn't take her seriously. She's a lightweight. In every way possible. So I think those are all of the things that led to her loss. And that means you can have all the money in the world and you can pay, Oprah, not Oprah directly, but Harpo Productions, a couple $1 million for a concert. That does not get you anything with the people I just talked about. I also think this illusion, I hope this is the last time we hear about never Trump Republicans. Yes. They do not exist. My line is they are like unicorns. They are mythical creatures. And she spent more than a month talking about Republican voters and Liz Cheney of all people who Republicans don't even like, by the way. So, you can pump in all the cash that you want. You can have a huge staff of people. And the other thing is the Democratic Party, these consultants are the worst. Yeah. They get rich every 4 years, whether they lose or whether they win. There's a revolving door of these people, some giving sometimes good advice, sometimes bad advice, and this time it was all bad, but no one talks about them.
I think they strongly need a civil war in the Democratic Party. Absolutely. This group of liberals are the most weak and out of touch that I've ever seen. For one, they have taken this idea of, quote, progressive and just made it woke stuff. So they've completely disassociated the economic lefty populism that used to be part of the Democratic Party, especially around this notion of unions and everything else. She went running around with Liz Cheney, and as you pointed out, was looking for Republicans as opposed to getting her base out. So it's like while she's out there trying to get one group, 8 million people stayed at home, which is just outrageous when you think about it. Like Trump could have gotten his exact same numbers. If she would have had Joe Biden numbers, she would have won the race by like 4 million votes. Yeah. And yet that didn't occur to her. In her mind, I'm going to go around with Liz Cheney and get these unicorn Republicans that hate Trump. Okay, but that didn't work. That didn't work.
It didn't.
And go for
it. When you said there needs to be a civil war, that needs to happen among Black people. Black people should be angry. Instead of trying to defend her, instead of spending all their time talking about Trump being a fascist, people want to have marches on Inauguration Day. You need to march to the DNC.
Yeah.
And Black people depend we act like we live and die based on whether a Democrat or a Republican is in the White House. A Democrat wins, hooray! A Republican wins, oh no! Well, I should leave the country. It's the end of the people acting like there's an apocalypse because Donald Trump won. And when there was an apocalypse, when people lost their COVID money, that was their apocalypse. So there needs to be a civil war against the Republican, these people who run the party who are worthless. If you can't win the origin of the word campaign, a campaign is a war. It's a battle. Yeah. And these people who lose a war and then shrug their shoulders and count their money and know they'll be in the next campaign, regardless of how well they did. And people saying she ran a good campaign. The loser did not run a good campaign.
Yeah. Joy-Ann Reid got on TV and said her campaign was flawless. And I know it was flawless because Queen Latifah endorsed her, and Queen Latifah doesn't endorse anybody. And it's like, are you serious? Like these limo liberals who are sitting on TV, got all the money in the world, and are acting like the world is coming to an end when the reality is they will be okay. It's everybody else. that's going to take a
Yes,
hit.
and the people who aren't okay weren't okay under Biden, and that's why they didn't
Exactly.
come out.
Exactly. The wild part about it is Kamala Harris ran the exact campaign that Chuck Schumer advised her to run. And I don't know if you remember this clip. Chuck Schumer, it was a few years ago, where Schumer was talking about this idea of basically how to marginalize the left. Because that's effectively what it was. This idea that the left is too difficult. You have to work so hard to get money from these rich folks because the left want things like Social Security and Medicare and expansion of those things. Like, all things being equal, I have this point of view that the Democrats, for the most part, hate the left.
Oh,
And
they
when I say,
do. They hate the
when
left more than they hate the right.
yeah, because it puts me in the mind of, do you remember when Sanders was running? Chris Matthews came out and said something to the effect of, well, it's better for Sanders to lose to Trump than it is for Sanders to take the party for a generation. And I think what they run into is this idea of, okay, we need money to run a campaign because Kamala Harris had to get $1 billion from somewhere. All right,
Right.
the people who we're going to ask that money for, they don't need healthcare, they don't need education, they don't need any of these programs that you want because they already got the money in order to get those programs. And so if you're a Democrat, and that's the crisis point, that's the contradiction in the way that you run, would it not be easier to be able to get either Republicans or people on the right that really don't care about those items? And Chuck Schumer made that point extremely clear.
And it's already won a large percentage of those people over. On the other hand, Trump is so new that this is the second point, for every blue-collar Democrat we will lose in Western PA, we will pick up 2, 3 moderate Republicans in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And you can repeat that in Ohio and Illinois and Wisconsin. The voters who are most out there figuring out what.
Just be clear, that didn't work.
No, that's from 2016. That's how Hillary Clinton failed. And they're still doing it.
That is literally the campaign she ran. And they told her behind the scenes, they were like, oh God, will she stop running around with Liz Cheney? Who the hell does she think like Liz Cheney? I mean, like, you're literally talking about Darth Vader's daughter, and you are arguing that Donald Trump is horrible and a fascist and Hitler, while the body count that is on Dick Cheney is astonishing from the standpoint of that war. And Liz Cheney is the same type of person that her dad is. Like, this contradiction never really made sense. Hey, no. Kamala Harris, you're the change candidate. What are you going to do different? I can't think of anything. Okay, but you're the change candidate. How can you not think of anything? Like, it's an astonishingly bad campaign. And so these people saying, she was great, she was flawless, it was because she was a Black woman, that was the issue. It's like, okay, just stop.
Like, why didn't Black people come out for her? How much of a drop-off was there among Black people?
Yeah.
So Black people are racist against Black people? I mean, there was I think it was a silly argument about whether she should be considered Black or not. I considered her Black. I also don't want to get into what I think is an irrelevant conversation. Yes. But are you really saying that Black people who voted for Biden but wouldn't come out for her were racist? Is that what we want to say?
Some of them have said that the Biden administration was racist because of the way they treated her. And it's like, it's like, dude, they nominated a Black woman for that role. And now that she lost, you guys are blaming Biden and saying that his team was racist. Like, that's some of the arguments that these people are making.
I think the blame goes back, I'd say, to 2020. Mm-hmm. And they rigged it for Biden. They got everybody else out. Bernie hung around for briefly, but then he capitulated too. It was clear then that Biden was not up to the task.
Right.
It was clear then. I and other people said there's something wrong. And what did they tell you? It was a stutter. He has a stutter. And I was like, no, it's not a stutter. It's if he can't get words out, I don't think it's because of stuttering. He's not well. I can't diagnose him. I'm not a medical professional, but he appears like everybody I've ever known who experienced the cognitive decline. That's what it reminds me of. I can put it that way. But they pushed him through. And these people who I think of as being cutthroat, instead just let him go on. I kept saying, they're not going to run him again, are they? They're not going to run Biden again, are they? But sure
Yeah.
enough, they tried. And then they had that debate in June, and he face planted. And some say that was a plot to get him out, and then try to think of someone. I don't know what they did, but they weren't looking out for the party. They weren't looking out for him. They didn't certainly care about their voters. And now I'm supposed to act like the stormtroopers are coming up the street because Trump is the president, and start, now this is silly thing, scrutinizing every Trump appointment. No, I don't think RFK Jr. should be the, Secretary of Health and Human Services.
I so disagree with you on this.
He caused a measles outbreak in Samoa. Did you know that? Do you know that story?
I did know that.
How do you have a guy who caused a measles outbreak as the head of Health and Human Services? But go ahead. I'm interested in what you have to say about that. Go ahead.
Fair enough. I totally accept the deficits associated with RFK. The benefits of RFK is the man was a corporate lawyer, and he looks at these companies, especially from the standpoint of health, with a certain amount of skepticism.
Well,
and his argument basically is pretty straightforward. It's like, look, we pay twice as much as every other country around the world for healthcare. We get half the results, meaning we die 10 years younger than everywhere else around the globe, despite the fact that we're supposed to be a modern nation. And does that have something to do with what we eat, what we put into our foods, what we allow in our foods? I can tell you, my ex-girlfriend used to be from Austria. She wouldn't eat a lot of the stuff that they had here because she's like, oh God, this is illegal in Europe. Oh, we don't put this in our food.
Well, I think you're right. But here's my question. I mean, who goes around defending Big Pharma? Nobody, unless they work for Big Pharma themselves. But are these people just going to go away and let RFK Jr. do away with direct marketing of pharmaceuticals to people, which I think was one of the worst things to ever happen? Yeah. But we have a bad outcome, mostly because we do not have a real public health care system.
That too.
I think that's the biggest reason. Yes, we have bad food, but that's my other question. These lobbyists, they're just going to sit around and let RFK Jr. put them out of business or take some of their profits. And Donald Trump, that's going to be okay with him? I don't think so, but we'll see.
I put it this way. From my point of view, it will be interesting to watch. That's my point of view. Because it's like, I don't believe these people are working in my best interest. And so having somebody that's a wrecking ball go into there that I know at the very least has that point of view, I can sit back and watch and see what happens. I agree. Look, I agree with you. It's going to be chaos. And I think pretty much all of these picks, with the exception of Tulsi Gabbard, I am terrified by.
I'm a little different. It's like this guy, Fox and Friends goofball as Secretary of Defense.
Right.
I think it's hilarious. First of all, I keep telling people, if you have my political point of view, if you're an anti-imperialist left person, you shouldn't care who's the Secretary of Defense. The Pentagon is going to do what the Pentagon does. That's the scary thing about the Pentagon itself. That it's this the Pentagon is the world's biggest polluter. They're right, aren't we? In the latest COP meeting, climate agreement, kicking the can down the road, waste of time. But the Pentagon is the world's biggest polluter. Well, how can it not be with 800 bases around the world? The U.S., the Pentagon is used to terrorize other countries.
Yeah.
Even to keep supposed allies in line. The nature of the Pentagon does not change. If you get somebody smart, dumb, qualified, unqualified, the Pentagon itself is scary. Yeah. So I'm not going to lose any sleep about who run. And also, these permanent government deep state guys, they're going to let some goofball ruin the Pentagon? I don't think so. So aside from having fun with it, I don't care. I know that everybody he's going to pick is someone I don't like, but that's also true of Democrats.
That's the thing I was about to say. It's when people are complaining, it's like, well, it's not like Joe Biden's policies on this stuff were to the left. Like, meaning how far right can you go beyond Joe Biden? I don't know. I don't even know if there's that much space.
I mean, he could go further to the right. And then it was all pretense. And that's another thing that I think hurt Kamala Harris. Remember that nonsense they were trying to sell us? He was the most progressive president since FDR. They oversold. Yeah. And I think that was to keep progressives in line. That was to shut progressives up.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you have these programs that people need, and then they disappear.
And
And you think people didn't remember after you said, most progressive since FDR, and then they look up and everything's gone?
Where do you think they go after this? I got to be honest. I have no answer to this question. Like, I don't even know where to begin on this question. Because truth is, it's not like when Trump lost, Trump still had a coalition. That coalition didn't go anywhere. It still was pro-Trump. When Sanders lost, Sanders still had a coalition. That coalition is still loosely affiliated, but that shows like the level of stick-to-itiveness that they were associated with Sanders. They would have crawled over hot glass to make that vote. Democrats don't have that. There was nobody who really loved Joe Biden or loved Kamala Harris. They were just people who hated Donald Trump. And her entire argument was framed around, we hate this Nazi, fascist, sexual abuser, felon. This is who we hate, and this is who we need to stop. And what I think is many Democrats think that Kamala Harris ran a perfect campaign because from their point of view, from their lens, that is exactly who Trump is. And when you name Trump like this, other people will obviously see him through that same lens, in which case they wouldn't vote for him. Missing the fact that that's your lens. That's just you as Democrats that believe that.
And there are people who don't like Trump who aren't going to bother to vote if they don't like the person running.
Exactly.
They forgot that too. This assumption that everybody who came out for Biden would come out for her.
Yes, exactly.
It's just ridiculous. And there's another thing too. The oligarchs run politics in this country.
Yes.
We just talked about how the Democrats are the party of the wealthy.
Yes.
And they run politics. So they would not give her $1 billion or even $500 million if she talked about the things I just said she should have talked about.
Exactly.
They don't want to hear that. That's why Build Back Better never happened. That's why these programs ended. These rich people run the Democratic Party.
I'm going to show you this. This is right here. So Ken Klippenstein put this up. And they were going into, the exit polling. I was fascinated by the exit polling. And one of the things had to do with class, economy, solidarity. And basically, main reason people said they liked the Democratic Party. All right. When you look at, in the old days, back in the 30s, they represent the working class. That was all the way up at the top. If you look today, it is down to what, 11%?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's astonishing. Like, meaning the context of the Democratic Party has fundamentally changed. When I was growing up, the Democratic Party was the party of the working class. That was a party that was going to deal with increased wages, increased Social Security, increases the Medicare, universal health care, et cetera. Then Sanders ran, and they did everything in their power to destroy Sanders, which made it clear, okay, they don't believe in these things in real terms. No. They just said stuff. All right. So I guess if the public is looking at the Democratic Party as being the release valve to the capitalistic system, and they are not that, and the public doesn't see them as that, then how are they even a viable party at this point? They've lost, it's almost like their main philosophical mandate of existence to the Republican Party, to a billionaire, blue-collar billionaire. I guess my thought is, where do they go from here now? I don't have an answer for that question.
I don't either. They're gonna, I think it's gonna be the last time they try to run anybody without a primary. I suspect that as much, but they're gonna run the primary process too. And even, Bernie was a liberalish reformer. But they acted like he was a communist. I mean, he tried to sell some of that socialistic DSA stuff, but he was never that. So what are they going to do? They don't want a leftist. Leftists will not be allowed to get the nomination. They're going to try to get an Obama-like figure, someone who can give the appearance of being a change candidate when they're really not. I don't know who that is. It could be someone nobody's thinking about now, who's no one's thinking about now. So I'm sure they're not going to just go away and disappear, but they've got a couple of years to think about it for those rich people to figure out. And I wonder how they feel about it. You wasted our money. I mean, what?
$1 billion. That's so much money. And James Carville recently came out and said, effectively, maybe Sanders was right. And he was like, people want health care, people want education, people want increased minimum wage. Minimum wage wins 70% of the time. We weren't talking about any of that stuff. And it's like, no duh. Like, that's the most aggravating.
They don't even mean that. They don't even mean that. They just have to say something in the wake of her defeat. Has Carville ever said, did he say that during this campaign? No.
No,
So these
no.
people are now, they're being phony now because she face planted so badly. But that's absolutely true. They won't even give the appearance. They won't even say, okay, in order to win this campaign, we've got to claim we want this thing or
Right.
that thing. The oligarchs have a complete hold on the Democratic Party, and they're going to try to find someone who can get their vote of approval, but who can market themselves as caring about the people.
Yeah, and Obama was that guy. And like I'm realizing how politically astute Obama was. Like he was just politically gifted. I mean, because it wasn't like the party was anything fundamentally different during his term. He was just a better candidate. So
But
it
you know
wasn't
what
like
saved us when Obama was president? The obstruction from the Republicans, the racism of the Republicans. He offered them austerity. Remember his grand bargain? He
Yep.
puts that everything's on the table, including Social Security.
Yeah.
And they wanted to defeat him. So they said, no, we have to thank Mitch McConnell for not cutting our Social Security instead of Obama.
You remember when Mitt Romney ran, and Mitt Romney didn't even write a concession speech because he thought he was going to win.
Yeah.
And he gets out there and has the right to speech at the last minute, realizing, oh my God, I've lost these battleground states. Margaret, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me on this. And look, I agree with everything that has come out of your mouth today. Thank you for joining me. Margaret Kimberly, senior columnist and editor to Black Agenda Report and author of Prejudicial, Black America, and the Presidents. You can follow Margaret on Kimberly on Twitter at Freedom Ride Blog. And you can find her work at blackagendareport.com. Thank you for this, Margaret. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.